Good morning. Well, I think we're recording good. You got you some coffee or some drink that you would like to drink to refresh yourself and get your Bible so we can get started today. We continue in Jeremiah, this time chapter 35. Jeremiah chapter 35. Give you a little background on this. One of the interesting things is this last week in our daily Bible reading, as you were reading Second Kings, we read about Jehoiakim and his reign as part of our daily Bible reading. So this kind of sets you up for this story because it's in the reign of King Jehoiakim. He is one of the last kings of Jerusalem, and this is right before the second conquering of Jerusalem, and we've already seen some get sent off to Babylon. That's going to be Daniel and all the officials and everything. Jehoiakim is a kind of a puppet king and a vassal, but yet he rebels against Nebuchadnezzar. And so the army is coming down uh, through the valleys, and they're destroying the towns in Judea. And this is then the scene that you have of Jehoiakim. You remember he did evil in the sight of the Lord, and now Jeremiah is going to talk to him about this evil and make a comparison, a great comparison. So let me ask you this question. You can start this off with your class. I think it'd be a great way. What's something that you've learned to do through observing examples, like watching a YouTube video or how to? Uh, did it help you? Did you actually learn by watching? Good question. I know today YouTube videos on how to do things that you may not be familiar with, such as I know a lot of times I'll look up. We have a Toyota vehicle, and sometimes like when I was changing the rear light bulb, and I looked at it, I said that does not look easy. Surely there's a video on how to get to that bulb, and so I did. I looked it up, typed it in there, had a YouTube video about how to change the lens out and get to the bulb. And I followed it. I watched them do it. I had to watch it 2 or 3 times. I'm going to be honest. When I first watched it, it was so fast that when I went outside to do it, I went, wait a minute. Did he show this part right here? So I would go back in, rewatch it, and I decided to watch it a couple of times till I was very familiar with it. And then I went outside and I did it exactly like the video. So for me, yes, I have watched somebody teach me by observing. And I could say that's the way I learned how to work on appliances with my dad. I watched him fix belts on dryers, heating elements, change out parts in stoves and air conditioners. And that's why I can do those things now, is because not only did I watch him, after I saw how to do it, he allowed me to practice. And he was there to guide me. But by watching him, I learned most of the things that I do. Same way I learned how to water ski by watching somebody else water ski, how they got up out of the water, how they balanced themselves. And then when I was given an opportunity to do it, I got up on the first try. So I learn easily by watching. This is a great way to get your class involved in some different things that they've done, maybe even cooking or repairing a faucet or a toilet ring or all kinds of things that they've learned by watching. And it's important for us to do that today because this is what's going to happen in our lesson. So let's look at the first section of this lesson here. It's called Tested. It begins in chapter 35 with verse 5. Let me just start right at the top, verses 1 through 4 there. I kind of want to give you that good introduction where it uses the thing. This is the word that came to Jeremiah from the Lord. And that's a little section you're going to see used over and over again. This is the word that came to Jeremiah from the Lord. And there's going to be several of these type of introductions about this is God's word. And it's for you to really take notice. Of course, I've already mentioned it was Jehoiakim, son of Josiah, king of Judah. And he gives a illustration here, a visual illustration as his message. He used physical props in his message. I like to do that because I think it makes a great impact on a lot of people, and they learn the lesson even better with a visual. So we see this is exactly what Jeremiah does in his sermon, in his message. That is a word from the Lord, and this is what God told him to do as part of his message. Go to the house of the Rehabites, speak to them, and bring them to one of the chambers of the temple of the Lord to offer them a drink of wine. So I took Hananiah, son of Jeremiah, son of Ahaziniah, and his brothers and all his sons, the entire house of the Rehabites, and I brought them into the temple of the Lord to a chamber occupied by the sons of Hanan, son of Igdaliah, a man of God, who had a chamber near the officer's chamber, which was above the chamber, Maaseiah, son of Shallum, the doorkeeper. And I set jars filled with wine and some cups before the sons of the house of the Rehabites, and said to them, drink wine. Now, you say, okay, so they're just going to have a wine tasting, I guess you'd say, is what it looks like. Well, as you begin this, you're introduced to this group of people by the name of Rehabites. We always like to say ites at the end of it, Rehabites at the end of it, but the actual Jewish is Rehabibs is the name of it. But you, whatever name you want to say, the rehabs, if you want to call them that, in order to help you to explain it, don't dwell so much on the pronunciation of the name that your class gets lost. Okay? It's okay. This happens to be their name. It's a harder name for you and I to say, but it's a clan. It's a group of people that have a common ancestor, which is Rehav. And it's important to learn from this exercise. So we're introduced to that. Here, he's brought them into an inner chamber there. They have witnesses, and they have these containers of wine and glasses there, and they say, have a drink. And let's see what happens, because this is one of those great illustrations here that God is going to use about this house, this clan. All right, look at verse 6. But they replied, we do not drink wine, for Jonadab, son of our ancestor Rehav, commanded you and your descendants, you must never drink wine. You must not build a house or sow a seed or plant a vineyard. Those things are not for you. Rather, you must live in tents your whole life, so that you may live a long time on the soil where you stay as a resident alien. We have obeyed Jonadab, son of our ancestor Rehav, in all that he commanded us, so that we haven't drunk wine our whole life. We, our wives, our sons, and our daughters. We also have not built houses to live in, nor do we have vineyards, field, or seed. but we have lived in tents and obeyed and done everything our ancestor Jonadab commanded us. However, when King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon marched into the land, we said, come, let's go to Jerusalem to get away from the Chaldeans and the Armenian armies. So we have been living in Jerusalem. So he's given all these details. Now, what I want you to understand is this family, this ancestry thing, which has been a lot of generations from Rehob, and but they were given this ancestral command for their family, and what it is, it sets them apart from other families. They have chosen to honor their ancestor, their father and their mother. You might say it's part of the Ten Commandments. When their ancestor said, we don't want to be like other people, and I'm going to give you this command because I think it's going to be important to keep our families together. And so he gives them a list of several things that they are not to do. Notice these 4 things there in verse 6. Do not drink wine. That's the first one. It sets them apart from other people. The second command there is you must not build a house. So there's the second one. Don't build a house. Third, don't sow seed. Don't be an agricultural person where you grow wheat, things like that, or plant a vineyard. That's the fourth one. You go, now, why is this? Well, think about it. What are these 4 things that they're not to do? How are those 4 things in common? So what makes those 4 things in common? Can I tell you that, first of all, he says, don't drink wine. One, he probably knows that drunkenness is easily, and I'm going to be honest, my dad sat my brother and my sister and myself down and told us that there is a weakness in our family. His granddad, his dad, both were alcoholics. And because of that, my dad said, please do not drink alcohol because there is a weakness in our family that we become alcoholics. And I don't want any of you to become alcoholics. So I encourage you not to drink alcohol. Well, I can see this with this family as well, but what it also does is, because based on the rest of the commands, don't drink wine is you may fall in love with its taste. And because you like wine, then you may break that 4th commandment and plant a vineyard. And if you plant a vineyard, you want to live by it, so you'd probably build a house. That's the second thing he told you not to do. And third, you're not to do a harvest with that. You may say, well, I need some other crops so that I'm not dependent totally on the grape crop to make wine, and then they would become agriculturalists. Instead, the father of their tribe here, Rehob, he says, I want us, all of our families, to stay nomadic like Abraham. I want us to live in tents. I want us to do goats and sheep and travel around, that we have to pick up everything that we own, and we go that way. We won't buy excessive things because we know we have to haul it everywhere. We will be consistently also following God and trusting him for the next place the flocks go to eat and to graze. And this will help us be content with what we have. So all of this may have gone into the background thinking of Rehob, because he wanted his family to stay consistently together. And so they made a pact about that. They said, okay, we won't do that. And, several generations there, you have Jonadab who carries on that same tradition with his family and passes it on down to them. And so this illustration here becomes a test of whether or not you're faithful to your promise that you've made. This family has been faithful to Rehob, Jonadab, and they've kept the promise. And they are confronted and says, "Here, drink wine." And they said, "No." Listen, how do they say that on there? It says, they replied, "We do not drink wine." And here's the reasons we don't drink wine. And he brings out all four of the commands that they had been taught. And they said they have been faithful. Verse 8 says, "We have obeyed Jonadab, son of our ancestor Rehob, in all that he commanded us." And notice it says, for our whole lives, none of us, we, our wives, our children, none of us have ever had a glass of wine, and we won't have a glass of wine. Second of all, we have not built houses. They've always lived in tents. And says, we do not own vineyards, fields, or seed. They've done everything their ancestor had promised the first generation of kids. And those kids held to it. And they taught the second generation, and they held to it. And the third generation, and they held to it. And the fourth generation, and they have held to it. And so this is a test of a promise of a line that has been kept. And the Rehabibs keep the promise before Jeremiah, the religious officials, and the city officials. They keep it. So they were tested, just like you and I are tested many, many times. So let me ask you this question. It's a good question. After introducing that, give some time for your class to discuss this question. Does the obedience of the Rehabibs say more about their faithfulness or their respect for Jonadab? And explain that. Wow. Does it say more about their faithfulness or their respect? That's a hard choice, isn't it? So maybe you'll get two sides to discuss that and see what they come up with, because both of them are very, very good. You know, you just think about it. Is it their faithfulness to the promise, or is it their respect for their ancestor that's causing them to keep their word? Good discussion. I think you'll have a great time with that. But let's move on then to the second one, which is restoration, your writer talks about, and that's verses 12 through 17. Let's look at verses 12 through 17. Then the word of the Lord came to Jeremiah. Notice how that says, the word of the Lord came to Jeremiah. And he uses this same introductory quote. This is what the Lord of the armies, the God of Israel, says. Go say to the men of Judah. Okay, well, it's a different group now he's going to speak to. Go to the men of Judah and the residents of Jerusalem. Will you not accept discipline by listening to my words? This is the Lord's declaration. This is what God says. Words of Jonadab, son of Rehob, have been carried out. He commanded his descendants not to drink wine, and they have not drunk to this day, because they have obeyed their ancestors' command. But I have spoken to you time and time again. God has spoken to Jerusalem and the men of Judah time and time again. And you have not obeyed me. Time and time again, I have sent you all my servants, the prophets, proclaiming, Turn each one of you from his evil way. Correct your actions. Stop following other gods to serve them. Live in the land that I have given you and your ancestors. But you did not pay attention or obey me. Yes, the sons of Jonadab, the son of Rehob, carried out their ancestors' command he gave them. But these people, people of Judah and Jerusalem, have not obeyed me. Therefore, this is what the Lord, the God of the armies, the God of Israel says. I will certainly bring on Judea and all the residents of Jerusalem all of the disaster I have pronounced against them, because I have spoken to them, but they have not obeyed. I have called to them, but they did not answer. You see, he made this comparison here about the restoration, how this one group of people listened to their ancestor and they stayed faithful to the words of their ancestor throughout these generations. They have not drunk wine. Their ancestor said, don't drink wine. They didn't. They said, don't build houses. They didn't. They still live in tents. Don't plant a vineyard. No, they haven't. Don't plant seed. Don't harvest anything. They did not. The only reason they were in Jerusalem is because there was an army coming, and these armies were killing everybody in their way. Everybody, everything, these armies were killing and taking everything that was there. So these Rehabites have decided to come to the walls of Jerusalem for protection. But they don't know what they've gotten into. And now Jeremiah says, they have been faithful to their ancestor, but guess what? Men of Jerusalem and Judea, you have not been faithful to me, your God. Yes, this clan has been faithful to the ancestors, followed everything he has asked them to do for generations and generations. And yet God says, I've asked you to serve me, to be kind to other people. And yet, what have you done? You've been wicked. You serve other gods. You build idols. You've done all the things I've asked you not to do. Therefore, this is your judgment. Yeah. All the things I said, all of the disaster is coming to you. It's going to happen. Now, this would be a great time to ask this third question. Let me ask this question for you and for your class. How did the Rehabites serve as an example for Judah to learn from? How did their actions serve as an example? Well, that's easy. You just talk about all the different ways there. I've really emphasized them here in my teaching. You may even want to turn this around. You may want to ask this question at the first of this passage and said, listen for the ways that they are an example to Judah and its Jerusalem and its residents. So you may want to ask that question right at the front and let them start listing those as you read the passage. And that's another way that you can do it. All right, well, let's jump to the third one and finish up. And this is commended. This section is commended. It's verses 18 and 19 of chapter 35. 18 and 19. Let's see that. But to the house of the Rehabites, Jeremiah said, this is what the Lord of armies, the God of Israel, says. Because you have obeyed the command of your ancestor Jonadab, and have kept all his commands, and have done everything he commanded you, this is what the Lord of the armies, the God of Israel, says. Jonadab, son of Rehob, will never fail to have a man to stand before me. That's it. They're commended for their faithfulness on here. So, that question of, is it their faithfulness, or is it that respect? It's both, isn't it? It's both. And God commends them for this, for listening to their ancestor, for obeying their ancestor, and says, you will never have someone in your family that won't appear before me. That means that clan's going to continue to exist even after the defeat of Jerusalem. And that's an important thing to hang head on, to know that your line. Now, y'all, ancestrism is one of the big things throughout the Old Testament. In fact, the worst curse that you could ever have is that your line ends with you. And we've heard that several times about different false kings that have come along, that their line ends. In fact, in what we see there in 2 Kings, where it says that Jehoiakim, his sons are killed before him, and his eyes are put out to let him know, you are the very end of the line. Isn't that's pretty tough, isn't it? It's pretty tough. And his line will end. God makes a promise through Jeremiah to that family of Jonadab, son of Rahav, and says, you will never fail to have someone appear before me. Your line will continue on and on because of your faithfulness. You see, it's not only faithfulness to the promise that they'd made, I think it was also their faithfulness to God through all of this. They have been out in tents, they've been wanderers, but they have been faithful. Part of that dedication of not drinking wine as well is to be set apart for God, to be a servant of God. And I think God honors them with this. Now, let me ask you this last question. How does faithfulness in one area give a person an opportunity to serve in greater ways? Ask your class that, to explore, how does faithfulness in one area of my life, give a person an opportunity to serve in greater ways in the future? Great way to wrap up this study about being worthy. Jeremiah 35, 5 through 19. Well, thank you for tuning in today. Let me pray for you. As you pray for your lesson, as you pray for our church, as we continue to look for a minister of music as well as a senior pastor. And I pray that you will continue to lift up both our committees and our church during this time. Thank you for tuning in. Let me pray with you. Father, bless those who've tuned in, that they may listen about faithfulness and how important it is to be faithful to you. It not only affects the here and now in my generation, but you say it affects our future generations as well. My faithfulness now and my faithfulness of my children and grandchildren, that it will be passed on for generation and generation as we stay faithful to you. Father, bless those who are faithful. Bless those who share this message with others, and lift you up as Lord and Savior in their gracious name. Amen. Well, have a great week. Thank you for tuning in.